Hey everyone, welcome back to the Internet of Things podcast. This is your host, Stacey Higginbotham, and your co-host,
Kevin Toffel.
And it has been a long time, but we are here with episode 197 for you guys. And we are going to be talking about our predictions for the year ahead and what we plan to see at CES, or not plan, probably what we think we're going to see. We're also going to be talking about smart speakers because, it's a day that ends in Y. We've got news on Google and their project Soli, which is their radar-based gesture technology. We've got a $100 million fundraise for a IoT platform company that values it at $3.6 billion, making it an IoT unicorn. Plus, we have to do it's not a correction, it's just we're idiots and we didn't see this. So we're going to do something on one of our answers from last week's episode. All of this, plus we have got Scott McDonald, who is a managing partner at MacRock Capital. He's going to be talking about trends in the industrial IoT for the year ahead. So we've got consumer, we've got industrial, and we've got December's voicemail winner. And we're going to hear a little bit more from DigiCert and their IoT security survey. And before we get to all of that, let's hear from another one of our sponsors, Affero. Looking for an IoT platform? Find out why Kenmore and D-Link picked Affero. Affero customers have experienced as much as an 80% reduction in time to market, 99% fewer support calls, and a 10x higher activation rate. Plus, they can reuse 90% of their work from one project to the next. To learn more, visit affero.io. That's AFERO.io. And if you want to meet with Affero at CES, just email ces@affero.com to sign up for a meeting. Or just send them an email saying, thanks for sponsoring my favorite podcast. All right, Kevin, let's get this party started.
Happy New Year, first of all, to you and all of our listeners. I can't believe it's 2019 already.
I can. 2018 was just a bear of a year.
This is true for many, many reasons. Some IoT related and some not. But yes, I'm very glad to flip that calendar.
So here we are flipping the calendar. First thing that we're probably going to talk about, because next week we're heading there. Actually, later this week we're heading there. We're going to Vegas for CES. That's the Consumer Electronics Show. It's a big show for consumer electronics.
Wait, I thought we were just going to Vegas. We have to go to this show thingy?
With like 120,000, 150,000 people, Vegas is that show this week. Man.
Yes, it is. This is your third CES?
It's actually going to be my fifth.
Your fifth CES. Look at you. You should get a special star.
Oh, and it's like your 20th?
No, I think it's 12th or 13th. I can't recall, but I'm looking forward to walking the many miles around Vegas, the convention floor, and all the hotels. And of course, I will be tracking all those steps like I always do to see if I can break my CES record, which I think was like 52 miles that week.
That is insane. You go right ahead. So we will have next week's episode is going to be on the 10th. We'll record it at CES. We'll be talking about cool things that we've seen. And then we're also doing a special CES episode that will come out the 14th. And on that episode, you will hear from people we met at CES talking again about consumer trends for 2019. But we're going to do it twice.
We kind of have to. Logistically, it's very tricky because CES is still going on as we're going to be recording the show from CES. So there may be new things we find out after the show, for example. And again, interviewing and talking to people, we've got to edit and so on and so forth. So I think that's a good approach. 2 weeks of CES coverage.
Yay! So just real quickly, we'll go down some. We won't go too much into it, but I think it's worth giving you a heads up on things that I think are just super nuts. So 1, connected bathrooms, you guys. I expect, and I tweeted this, and I was like, I regret to inform you, we are going to see smart toilets at CES. We are. We're going to see them from many of the major brands, and they're going to have some crazy features. And I can't give you too many details about all of these. Plus, I'm sure I'm going to see even more. But you should expect some smart speaker toilets, maybe some lights, maybe some interesting cleaning technology. It's going to be wild.
I'm going to let you hit those booths. Because that's not my jam. That's all I'm going to say.
We're going to shoot some video. It's going to be fun. So that's in addition to toilets, you're going to see a lot happening in the bathroom. So smart mirrors going to be a thing. A lot of smart health technology that's going to try to incorporate things from your scale and your mirrors and other new devices that are going to be out.
I hope all these bathroom essentials in the smart home are battery powered, because I don't feel like rewiring electricity in my bathroom for something like a smart mirror, for example.
That is a point. So, and we saw this actually, was it 2 years ago that Moen launched they had a smart shower thing. And then last year, Kohler launched a couple smart bathroom things as well. The challenge with a lot of these is people do not have electricity. Like you have to put the Moen smart shower thing in, you had to install basically a touchscreen in your shower, and you had to wire electricity to your shower. And that's...
Yeah, do that with the water off is my recommendation.
I'm going to tell you, hire a professional for this particular install.
Yeah.
So that'll be kind of
a thing.
Reason not to do it. I don't know.
Yeah.
Another thing I think we're going to see are some really crazy cool headphones. I think we're going to see a lot of, we've talked in the past about getting Google Assistant, Madam A, all of these, and Madam A is Amazon's digital assistant. Getting that into headphones. I think we're even going to see some cool sensors. If not at CES, I think we're going to see it this coming year in 2019.
Well, there's a bunch of smart headphones and hearables out now, and it's early in this market for sure. And companies have integrated assistants into headphones. Of course, those headphones need to be connected by Bluetooth to some smarter device to get the information from the cloud. And I wonder, do you think maybe there's a way for these headphone makers to make headphones almost always connected, but not with Bluetooth, maybe with Wi-Fi, but keep the Wi-Fi off when you're not using the assistant parts just because of Wi-Fi's battery drain? I mean, I'm trying to think of what could advance this.
I'm thinking more of the type of sensors they put in it. So I'm thinking a lot more health and wellness oriented. I'm thinking we'll probably see, you can actually get a lot of really interesting information from the ear. So I think we're going to see something like that as opposed to an always on individual.
I think you're right when you frame it that way, but I'm going to say that I don't think they'll be a big thing. And the reason I think that is because headphones aren't something you wear all the time. Like my Apple Watch, for example, or take an Android watch, doesn't matter.
That's true. Now, I could see it for more accurate, like a heart rate monitor.
Yes.
In your Apple Watch, actually, for people who don't have an Apple Watch. This may be, and it may be more power efficient or a better place to put it. I don't know.
There's definitely an accuracy benefit in certain things. No doubt about it. I don't know. Maybe for people who don't wear watches or other wearables, these would be interesting.
Yeah. So, and they are way more accurate.
Mm-hmm.
And speaking of health, I think in 2019 and, also at CES, we're going to see a sea change in the number of health and wellness related devices and algorithms. And we're going to start seeing FDA approval on a lot of them, or on some of them, I should say. And that's going to be really interesting because we see right now, some of it's just kind of snake oil, right? You're like, you can track this. It'll be amazing. But you don't really know if it's actually doing anything or, if this heart rate monitor is actually accurate enough, right? But with Amazon, they've got actually Omron is a blood pressure cuff monitor. They're actually making a wristband that's going to check your blood pressure constantly. So if you look at something like that and you can now ask, Madam A, what's my blood pressure? That becomes really kind of exciting. And then I also see a lot of research has been going into things like gait detection for various illnesses, and then things like using your voice to understand if you're depressed, if you have Parkinson's, if you have some other medical condition. And I think we're going to start to see that in FDA-approved fashions on our smartphones and devices. And that's going to be freaking awesome / scary.
I think you're right. And I also would add to it, I hope to see, I'm not going to say expect to see, but I hope to see more simpler ways to share this data with your health providers.
I think that's going to take a little bit longer, but that's okay. And I think that gets to actually the next thing that I have on my list, which is privacy. I think we're going to have to come up with ways to understand how this data is being used, and we're going to have to figure out how to protect consumers and how far we want to go with like health insurance and pre-existing condition type coverage, because this is going to expose a whole new area of risk. And that's scary for health insurance. And I don't know how we're going to handle that. I mean, if you can tell if someone's having Parkinson's symptoms super early, this is not something that can be cured. It can be managed, right?
Mm-hmm.
So what does that mean if you can detect it early?
How does it affect rates, coverage? Can you even get coverage? Absolutely. I think this is more of a long-term problem or challenge.
We're going to see those things start to happen this year.
Yes. And because we've started to see this already in terms of with driving, for example, with safe driver monitoring devices that you put in a car, for example. You can get your rates adjusted down or up based on how you drive for 60 days or 30 days. But you're right. The reason I say it's a longer term thing is because you get into policy now and government, and the healthcare industry is so slow to change, as are the laws that regulate it, where it is regulated. So, but you're right. This is where we start to see how that's going to shake out in the coming years.
Yeah. So, John Hancock, for example, has a insurance policy that requires you to have a connected wearable device as part of it. So it's not too crazy. Also on the privacy front, we're going to see some sort of regulation. I guarantee it. It's going to be probably pretty crappy. A lot of negotiations back and forth, but I think 2019, we're going to get our version of a GDPR, or we'll get close enough that it might pass like in 2020. We'll see. Or maybe, let's just not even talk about that. Okay, other two big things. One is MVNOs for IoT connectivity. I think there's a whole effort taking place with the platform companies like Ayla and Particle, and those guys are introducing cellular platforms, cellular services for IoT device makers, and they're acting kind of as an MVNO. You're seeing them bucket a lot of options from different carriers, so you don't have to do that yourself as a client. I think we're going to see an advancement on that from other new entrants into the market like Twilio. There's some interesting things happening in Europe here. So I think we're going to see kind of this layer, this abstraction layer on top of cellular connectivity that basically allows people to connect their devices without having to negotiate with the carriers. And that'll be worthwhile.
I agree. I mean, and we've already seen Twilio, for example, start to do this with a data SIM card that you can use for IoT device testing and so on. This is definitely a shift from what MVNOs have done in the past, which is offer consumer services, where they would bundle up maybe text, talk, voice, and data from the bigger carriers and resell in smaller chunks and so on for your cell phone plan, for example. This is more, I think, geared towards industrial, towards device makers, and so forth. So I would think that the service would come with some devices, in fact. I don't know if you probably pay a monthly subscription, but maybe you don't have to provision it. That's for example.
And some companies are basically saying, "Hey, we'll connect your device as long as it doesn't do more than this many megs of data, a month, and this is the fee." And then that allows companies to say, "All right, we're going to charge you this, and we can expect that to stay the same." So that'll be good. And then there's also things like satellite connectivity, which I think we'll hear a lot about in 2019. I'm curious how far we'll get into actual services, but they're definitely launching satellites and hoping to provide some sort of IoT service. I still question this business case a lot. So, I mean, just from a power consumption, from a demand, from a cost.
Well, and I'm going to say it and you're going to cringe, but I got to mention 5G because it's the big hoo-ha at the end of 2018 with the first devices and hotspots and so on and so forth, and how it's going to change the IoT world. And no, I don't think so in 2019.
I'm with you on that. I'm like, the world is not going to change. It'll get gradually better. All right. And then my final prediction, which will be really interesting, I think, and this is kind of a crazy prediction, but I think we're going to see a lot happening with voice programming, not necessarily for consumers, although we've seen that actually in the smart home, but I think we're going to start seeing it in like Amazon's AWS. I think you're going to start to be able to ask things of Madam A or maybe even Cortana, and you ask the assistant, and the assistant will give you information about like your cloud settings and whatnot. And that's going to be really fun, interesting. We'll see.
Well, it's interesting to me. I mean, just from a programming standpoint, having a new interface, a voice interface for making things happen that are not, let's say static information is very interesting. Probably not for like your typical consumer, but we geeks like this stuff.
Yeah. Well, and I think consumers like it too, because it makes things easier. And so I'm interested in like, how is the syntax going to develop? How do we actually implement this?
Will there be a standard?
Yeah. The basics.
Yes. So those are interesting. I have a couple that I'll run through pretty quickly, things that we may hear, see, et cetera, at CES, and maybe some hopes and expectations for the year in this space. I have to mention, like we do every year, Siri and HomeKit, because maybe 2019 will be the year for these.
Do you think so?
No, I don't think so. Although you had mentioned something just before the show, and I neglected to put it in the show notes, but one of the Google head honchos just went over to Apple to work on voice interface and AI.
Yes. John Gianandrea. He actually had gone over there a while back, and I think he joined Apple in April of 2018. He went there from Google, but now he's been promoted to their executive team. So I think Apple's getting serious about Siri.
Yeah. Well, I'd have to say 2018 was a bust on that front for them, because a couple reasons. I think most of them are obvious. And there's one that's maybe not so obvious, or you wouldn't think it is. The speakers and digital assistants that are succeeding aren't just the smartest ones. They're the most widely available ones.
Yes.
And not everyone has an iOS device or a HomePod, which really, I mean, that's been out for a year now, folks.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah. That's all I'm going to say about that. Something that I started to see in 2018 actually has been happening longer than I suspect. I'm I don't want to say worried about Zigbee and Z-Wave, but I'm seeing less of a place for them in this cloud-connected, API-centric world of the smart home. And it's funny because somebody just asked me the other day, he's like, I think I'm going to get the new Echo Hub because it has that extra radio. I'm like, what are you going to use it with? Do you have something that uses that radio? He's like, well, no, what do you use it for? I'm like, well, I have Zigbee and Z-Wave devices that are sensors and things that are low power. But if you don't have those and don't plan to add those, why are you buying this hub? Do you think I'm crazy on that?
No, I have been thinking of this for years, right? And it's still, Zigbee and Z-Wave still keep trucking along, but I do think they're going to find themselves as more niche components, especially as Bluetooth mesh gets better and integrated in more sensors, because that's where you see Zigbee and Z-Wave is in lights and sensors, because you need low power and Wi-Fi can't do it. So, but yeah, that's where I'm at.
Yeah, I know some people won't be happy to hear that, and hopefully I'm wrong, at least for those people. That's all I'm going to say. Yeah, this year ended with an interesting twist on the smart home user interface. It's not just voice now. We're really getting more into displays, and I suspect in 2019 we'll see more home dashboards that may not just be like the smart displays from Google or the Echo Shows and so on. More integration with TVs and other displays. We'll see.
Yeah, and I think context is going to really, we've talked about this for like half a decade. Yeah. I think context is going to be the key to making that work and feel almost magical. Like the ability to say, oh, this is the kind of content someone's going to want to see on their television.
Yep. And that actually leads to another thought I have, and I've been saying this for a couple years now. The smart homes that we have are actually not that smart. They just respond to things when we tell them to respond to things. They respond to our voice with somewhat canned responses and skills and so on and so forth and actions. Yes, you can set up routines and things like that. I get that. But where's the machine learning? Where is the smart home getting smarter? Where maybe it notices a trend or a pattern, like you come home every day between 5 and 5:15. So do you really need to have a smart light routine that turns the outside lights on at 5? No, maybe you don't. You don't need to manually do that. It can start doing things. Right now, the smart home doesn't do much on its own. So I think and hope that we'll see more in the AI and ML area here. And then lastly, well, two things. Smart speaker overload. I'm already sick of it. I have more smart speakers than I have rooms to put them in. That could lead towards other devices, mobile devices, robots and such that have a speaker and a microphone so that we can get rid of all of these speakers. I just don't know that we want microphones in every room. Speakers are fine, but microphones, I don't think we need that. And
I'm not buying the robot thing. Sorry. I have to tell you. I'm like,
That's okay. Trust me, I'm gonna be all over that robot section at CES looking for this. And, I may come up short, but if not, I'm gonna say, told you. Lastly, something that we talked about on our last show, I don't think a lot of these smart home device makers were really prepared for the fast uptake of mesh Wi-Fi. So I really think this year, newer products are just going to work with mesh Wi-Fi. And the reason is a lot of these devices have less capable Wi-Fi chips, maybe only 2.4 gigahertz support and so on. And they need a dedicated network name and on that channel or on that frequency. And you don't have that with mesh. So I really think that problem starts going away in 2019.
I hope so.
Me too. Me too.
I'm like, yay. All right. And I also think we're probably going to see, we've already seen this year. I don't think there's less consolidation now. I think we've established that Google Home and Amazon's Madam A are pretty much the king of the hill when it comes to the kings of the hill, when it comes to the consumer smart home.
King and queen.
Okay. All right.
Well, you could you could have changed the voices, but yeah. I always think of Google as the he and Madam A as the she. I don't know why.
We should not anthropomorphize these things.
I know.
Oh, we're terrible.
It's hard to do when you have a robot, though, that can actually speak for one of these. So.
Okay, fine. Robots. Okay. But, Bixby, Cortana, who else is out there? Siri. So who is our best and smartest smart speaker? And we actually talked about this in the newsletter, not last week because we didn't have one last week, but the week prior, Loop Ventures did we'll call it an IQ test for smart speakers. And they discovered that they tested both understanding of the inquiry and then the ability to execute. And Google won out, in a major way. But none of them were that bad. I was actually pretty impressed.
No. When it comes to understanding the queries, all of them were at 99% or better, which is good. And just to be clear, the same questions were asked of each of these digital assistants. 800 questions. So I think that's a pretty reasonable sample size. Actually, I'm impressed that they did this. But when it comes to answering correctly, that tells you a lot about who is truly smart and who is not in this space. Google Assistant led the way with 87.9% correctly. Siri was actually second at 74.6%, which surprised me. And then Madam A, 72.5%, and Cortana, unfortunately, 63.4% questions were answered correctly. But this leads to why the big two are the big two in general. They have the biggest knowledge graphs, I think. And they are, as I said earlier, the most widely available to capture data as well. So, Bixby's not even part of the conversation here.
Is Bixby out?
Well, Bixby has been out on phones for well over 2 years on a Samsung phone. Again, you're limited, just like Siri, you're limited to iOS. So that's a problem for Samsung. Additionally, they don't have a search engine of their own. They have a browser on Samsung devices, but I don't think they can capture nearly as much data as anybody else. Honestly, they have I'm going to say, this is bold, they have no business being in this space. They just don't.
Ooh.
And in fact, that Samsung Galaxy Home speaker that looks like the fondue pot that was announced in August, coming soon, they said, which presumably was before the end of the year. I'm pretty sure they said before the end of the year. It is not available for sale yet, and it is now 2019. And top of that, this is very telling to me. It was reported just last week, and we'll find out at CES apparently, Samsung may be partnering with Google to add Google Assistant to its smart TVs instead of, or I guess I should say alongside of Bixby. That's waving the white flag right there.
Yes, that is, but it's kind of necessary.
It's necessary if your digital assistant is junk, yes. I know I sound cranky about this, but I sat through a 90-minute Samsung CES press event last year, and it was all SmartThings. It was all Bixby across their entire product line. Ovens, fridges,
and
everything.
They in 2018 did switch from the original SmartThings to the new integrated SmartThings that can talk to lots of stuff. Yes. Samsung existing gear. So they did integrate. And that's, if you think about it, they had special apps for their refrigerators, special apps for their televisions, and they brought it all under the SmartThings. The plan was to bring it all under SmartThings brand in that app. I don't know if everything is there yet, but a lot of it is.
Well, I haven't looked at the app in a while, several months, I should say. And just transitioning from the SmartThings Classic app to the new one was horrendous, a horrendous user experience. And if you look at the reviews of those apps, a lot of people are not happy or were not happy at the time with the new app. So it's probably worth a revisit. I'm going to wait until the Dog and Pony Show at CES, and then I will take another look at it.
Take a gander. Yes, I played with SmartThings just a month ago, and the transition was horrendous. You're right. Things still work as anticipated. I don't have any smart Samsung appliances, so I couldn't bring anything. I just don't have anything that I could have brought over, and I wasn't going to buy a new washer and dryer or anything crazy. So it's a little hard for me to test exactly what it's like to bring in the new stuff. But the old stuff, they smoothed it out so it works for the most part.
Right. And I want to kind of exclude like the SmartThings ecosystem and the hub and products because it's really good, actually. It's not that. It's the whole Bixby thing. That aspect of it just has rubbed me the wrong way since they launched it. And all of my experience with it has just backed up my, I guess you could say preconceptions, which maybe isn't fair, but still, it just isn't as good. They cannot yet compete. And I don't see how they can compete, quite honestly. Again, they don't have the back end of information that a Google or an Amazon has.
Okay. Well, that was a lot of cranky Kevin. We don't see a lot of cranky Kevin on the show.
I know. It's a new year. I had to get it all out. I'll be good for the rest of the year, I promise.
It's a new year and Kevin's cranky. Okay. Well, let's blow through some news stuff real fast. So we've got a test for drone deliveries and people love the fact that they can get their stuff in just a few hours. And other people who are not getting their stuff in a few hours hate the fact that drones are noisy.
Yeah, the funny thing is, and this is happening now in Australia, these are a test program from Wing, which is a subsidiary of Alphabet. And I've had drones before. And one of the things is, they can be a little noisy, but I think the bigger issue, and some people are complaining about it, the ultrasonic frequencies from a drone motor drives or can drive pets crazy. It scares the bejesus out of my dog, for example. I actually got rid of my drone because of the dog. I couldn't hear what he was hearing, but boy, he did not like it.
Yes. We also have research from the University of Singapore on how would you describe this? Go, Kevin.
I would say that this is a addition to sensor technology that could allow the sensor to wake up when it's needed. Basically cut the power consumption down apparently by at least 1,000 times down to the picowatt range. And that's because you don't, in certain use cases, need a sensor on all the time. It doesn't need to be drawing power from its battery, from electricity, etc. You just need it when it's needed. And I know that's hard to predict, so I don't know how this is going to be implemented, but the technology seems to be promising so that if we can figure out the right algorithms, sensors won't be using nearly as much battery power.
Woohoo! Always a good thing. We've got some news. Samsara, which they launched a while back. They've been an IoT platform. They were going to be very generic, and then they really honed in on the vehicle space. They have raised $100 million at a $3.6 billion valuation. And this is mostly for fleet management and cars and trucks. And it makes a lot of sense. The guys who founded Samsara were the founders of Meraki. And the idea that they had there was Wi-Fi was getting really complicated as people brought more devices into an enterprise corporate network. And Meraki, they built these special routers and access points, plus software that made that a lot easier. That's kind of the idea with Samsara. It's, oh my gosh, we're bringing all these connected sensors on board, and we need both a new radio technology and software to manage that. What they ended up going with was saying, okay, that's too big, that's too broad. We're just going to do this for fleet management. So this is a good thing. I'm glad to hear it. I had been kind of worried about them, but there's a lot of IoT platforms out there that are not going to make it. So I'm glad to see these guys well-funded and apparently doing really well in their selected market. So yay!
Well, they are very well-funded because this raises their total funding up to $230 million. And the company says they haven't even used any of their previous round of funding yet. So I don't know what kind of plans they have, but they must be big.
Yeah, and a lot of companies are anticipating a big market turndown in 2019. So it's probably wise of them to do this.
Get the money while you can.
Exactly. Especially in an area like IoT platforms. Okay, and in other news, Google, they got FCC approval at the very end of the year, which is good actually, because the FCC is going as part of the government shutdown. They got FCC approval for a Project Soli, which uses radar. It uses 60 gigahertz to detect your gestures. So the idea they used it, you use this to detect gestures on fabric, on, I guess, skin, on whatever you want, and you can use it to control screens. This was actually launched at the same time Project Jacquard was way, way, way back in
yes.
Was it 2015? I think so.
I think so, with the Levi's jacket.
Yeah. And so Soli hasn't gone places. And one of the reasons is that they couldn't get it at a high enough power. They have an experimental license from the FCC to play with this, but they couldn't get enough power to get accuracy with the gestures. So this latest approval gives them basically more dBs. It lets them transmit at a higher power. So hopefully that will improve the resolution of the gesture understanding capability, thus making this viable.
I can see the immediate use case for people who have, in fact, in the news release, it mentions this could benefit users with mobility or speech impairments because, speech is a great UI, but not everybody can use it. So I get that. I wonder if this has to be combined with something physical like a Project Jacquard jacket, for example. I'm thinking not. I'm thinking because it's radar, you could literally have a virtual on-off switch.
You could, yes.
Twist your fingers in the air and have something turn on in your house, for example. So in a sense, like voice, I've always said, is the invisible interface. In a sense, this truly is an invisible interface.
Yes. And right now they're using 60 gigahertz. And I think last month I wrote about why 60 gigahertz was so interesting for the Internet of Things. And I talked about fall detection and some of the other cool things that companies are doing with this. And somebody actually pointed out in the comments that Project Soli uses it as well. So you're right, Kevin. That's a very prescient statement. This could be like the other invisible interface. All right. And now it is time for our IoT Podcast Hotline. Before we get to this week's question, I have to fix an answer from last week's episode. Our answer wasn't wrong. It was like the wrong way to do it. And I apologize for that, you guys. I don't know why my brain decides to do things the most difficult way possible.
It's on me too. Both of us neglected to recognize the native Madam A says function that's in the Madam A app.
I will defend myself with my Madam A app experience is horrible.
It's crap.
Mine, even the guy who I hired someone from Amazon to come and play with Madam A at my house probably a couple months ago. And even he was like, wow, your app runs so slow. It's terrible. And I was like, I know. But the question was basically, how can I have an audible notification that my door is open or a sensor status has changed? And the answer is you can use a routine. So a lot of people are using SmartThings for their sensor management because Madam A does not handle a lot of sensors. But you basically use SmartThings for this sensor has changed state, right? So you put that in there as part of your routine. So when this happens, so SmartThings.
That's your trigger event.
Yeah. SmartThings motion sensor triggered. Then do this. And then do this, you just go to, it's called, I'm going to say it, you guys, cover her ears, Alexa says. So you select that and then you say, what does she say? So you can write down the door is open or I saw a dog, whatever you want her to say. And you can set the volume. And that's how this works.
And it actually is easy, yes, because I ran through it right before.
Because we talked about doing notifications and we hated it and we thought it was clunky as all get out.
Yeah. And realize there are some pre-canned responses in there. You have to use the custom command if you want something like, the back door is open or, this light was left on for more than 15 minutes, etc. This is a great feature. Yes, we missed it. It gets back to the smart home really isn't that smart thing. This stuff should just happen in a sense.
Although it would be irritating if you didn't want it to happen. You'd be like, shut up. It's kind of like the alarm system that beeps whenever anything happens. And you're like, stop beeping. And thank you guys. We had a bunch of you send in just really nice messages. Like, hey, I don't know, maybe you guys didn't see this, but so thanks for letting us know. And thanks for everyone who sent that in and was like, hi, you could do it this way. So
they were very gracious to us, weren't they?
I was like, hey, thanks for giving us the benefit of the doubt on that one. Woo. All right. Now we will go to two more things. One, this week's question. But first, before that, we're going to announce our winner for the Schlage Connect Smart Deadbolt. This month's, or actually last month's winner, December's winner, is Chris. Go, Chris. Yeah. Get your lock on. So, congratulations to you, Chris. And now we'll go to the question for this month. And I have to tell you that once again, this week, the IoT Podcast Listener Hotline is brought to you by Schlage, maker of electronic locks. Schlage electronic locks can make life so much easier and more convenient. No more keeping track of extra house keys. Each member of your family can have their own access code. To see what's possible, visit schlage.com to learn more. All right. This week's voicemail question is from Kevin. Not this Kevin, a different Kevin. Let's hear it.
Hi, Stacy and Kevin. It's Kevin in Raleigh, North Carolina. And my question is really about ecosystems. So we have the Ring doorbell, and now as a Christmas gift, the floodlight cam for the back of the house. But everything else in the house is Google Assistant, except, of course, for the iPhone, but that assistant is not so helpful. The question is, am I going to have to buy into the Amazon ecosystem to get the most out of the Ring systems, or can I get by with enough if this, then that, and maybe even Home Assistant kind of work to actually be able to do things like see the front door and the back door from a lot of places other than just the Ring app? Thanks, and love the podcast. Have a great one. Bye.
Oh, Kevin, this is such an important topic that I actually was going to write a post about it because I'm so frustrated. The short answer is you can connect your Ring doorbell to your Google Home.
But
But you can't do what you probably most want to do, which is see who's at the door. Right now, Google will support the ability to take a video doorbell and connect it to your Google Home device and even Google Displays and Google Chromecast. But Ring does not allow for that. So, and I don't know if that's because Google and Ring aren't talking or what the deal is, but Ring right now, and Ring actually for a while did not connect with the Amazon stuff easily as well. So it may be a Ring thing. But Ring will let you talk to your Ring doorbell through Google Home. You can ask it about when your doorbell last rang. You can ask it to start a new recording. You can ask it to turn on motion alerts, but you can't see who's at your door.
Right. And I suspect it's less about Ring not talking to Google than it is about Amazon not wanting to talk to Google about this since Amazon bought Ring last year.
So yes, the short answer is you can connect it. The longer answer is you can connect it and get some basic information, but probably not the visual information you're looking for. The solution, I hate to say it, you guys, is to pick an ecosystem.
Yep.
The Google Home, if you're going to be on Google Home, the Nest Hello doorbell, which is an awesome doorbell. Both the Ring and the Nest doorbells are excellent. I think the Nest is actually a better doorbell because it's a little bit faster and the facial recognition on it is phenomenal. So I'm actually, if you're looking for the best video doorbell and that's your focus, I say go with the Nest Hello.
Which means you'd be a Google ecosystem.
Right. And so if you're in the Google ecosystem already, take back your Ring, man, and get the Nest Hello. It's going to do everything you want, and it's a better doorbell. Now, if you're in the Echo ecosystem,
yeah,
don't get a Nest because Google is not going to, Google so far, and I don't think anytime soon, will give the video APIs out. So then you want to be in the Ring ecosystem, which is a really good doorbell, and they have to be getting closer on the better facial recognition and understanding.
Yeah, it's just disappointing, though, that you have to pick an ecosystem for your lock, your doorbell. And
far, I would say it's really only for those devices. Like video cameras, if you want to see it on your home display and your doorbell. Like sensors, you can pull in through a variety of platforms. Even Arlo, if you want to, maybe you don't want to get the video doorbell, just pop an Arlo out there and then you can do a lot of things. I don't know. It's not everything. It's just those things. Doorbells are a weird place.
Agreed. And the shame of it all, well, it could be alarm systems too, but the shame of it all is we should have seen this coming because Google, Nest came from Google and then went back in to Google. It was, spun out to Alphabet and then went back to Google. And then, as we said, Amazon bought Ring. That's when you start seeing the silos go up. And that's the disappointing part.
So yes, we are in siloed territory. Kevin, I'm sorry to tell you this. That is our advice on this. And guys, if you have a question for us, please give us a call at 512-623-7424. The answer may not always be what you want to hear.
Yeah, we guarantee an answer. We just can't guarantee one that you like.
So, all right. Well, that concludes this portion of the show. And stay tuned for Scott McDonald of McRock Capital, who is going to be talking about the big shift in enterprise and industrial IoT. Basically, the last 5 years have been one thing, and now we're getting ready for the next 5 years. And will you guys be prepared? Find out after a message from this week's sponsor. Hey everyone, we are taking a break from the Internet of Things podcast for a message from our sponsor. This week's sponsor is DigiCert, and I have Mike Nelson, who is VP of IoT Security at DigiCert. Can you remind our listeners what it is that DigiCert does?
Yeah, DigiCert is the world's leading provider of scalable security solutions for identity and encryption. And we provide these solutions for web servers, enterprise security, and my favorite, of course, IoT.
Mike, we've learned a lot about the survey DigiCert conducted. There are clear benefits to organizations prioritizing and implementing IoT security. Can you tell us about some of the ways the successful organizations are benefiting?
We broke the respondents into a handful of groups. There were top-tier organizations that demonstrated a mastery of IoT security, middle tier, and then the bottom tier, of course, are organizations that were really struggling to master IoT security. And the difference between the top and the bottom tier was shocking. Every one of the bottom tier organizations had experienced a security mishap, things like denial of service or malware, compared to just 32% of the top tier. The bottom tier was much more likely to have reported problems in those areas. They were nearly 6 times as likely to have experienced data breaches and unauthorized access to IoT devices compared to the top tier. And, the survey, from my perspective, it really highlights that the things that the top tier organizations are doing for IoT security are working, and they're protecting their organizations.
So where should organizations start when building an IoT security strategy?
My recommendation for organizations as they're looking to stand up an IoT security practice is, first of all, to make sure that they build security into the DNA of the way they're developing their products. And that would mean everything from making sure that they think about cybersecurity in the architecture and the design phase, testing for cybersecurity, and then in the deployment, making sure that you're doing the things that are continually going to keep your devices secure. So we asked the top tier organizations the things that they were doing that were leading them to be successful with IoT security, and they gave us 5 things. The first was the scalability of their solutions and making sure that the scale of the solution they put in place won't just meet their needs for today, but also 5 years down the road, making sure that they're doing integrity check on any package that's being sent to the device, doing authentication on all connections coming to and from the device to make sure no unauthenticated connection or person can get into the device. Reviewing and performing risk assessment is always important to understand the vulnerabilities of the device. And then finally, and of course, encryption of sensitive data and making sure that you're encrypting data both at rest and also in transit.
Thanks, Mike. That's excellent advice. So where can people go to learn more about the survey and DigiCert?
Yeah, the full details of the survey can be found at our website at digicert.com/IoT security.
Hey everyone, welcome back to the Internet of Things podcast. This is your host, Stacey Higginbotham, and today's guest is Scott McDonald, who is a managing partner and co-founder at McRock Capital. Hi Scott, how are you doing?
Hey Stacey, I'm doing well. How about yourself?
I am excellent, and I'm excited to kick off the new year with you as our first guest on the show, partially because you have a great theory that I think is going to set us up nicely for big trends in 2019. And also because your firm invests heavily in industrial IoT companies. Let's just get this started. Talk to us a little bit about what you've been investing in the last few years and what you think is going to change in the coming year.
Well, I'm excited to be on the podcast, for one. Thank you for having me. And what weight on my shoulders to kick off 2019 talking about all things IoT. You're right. McRock Capital has been focused exclusively on the industrial side of the IoT for the past 7 years. Our very first venture fund was raised in 15, $70 million focused exclusively on the industrial side of the IoT. And back then, what we really were looking at was the collection of data from machines and the connectivity of that data. So I have an analogy that I use that the IoT can be the body and the brain, and there are two different portions as we evolve through the IoT. And the last 5 years has been about data from equipment, machines, and sensors and connecting it. And in some ways, cleansing the data. But it really has been a data play. That's the body. And in the next 5 years, we're seeing a shift now to the real disruptive side of IoT, which is the analytics side. Now that we have all this dark data, we can start to do things with it using machine learning and AI, general analytics that's going to drive huge disruption in big industry, and it's going to drive step functions in productivity.
Okay, and you just used a phrase, dark data. What does that mean?
So dark data is unintelligent data. It's just data. Data is a building block of some value creation, but until you do something with the data and recognize patterns or get the so what or the aha moment from a pool of data, it's just dark data. It's data that's not doing anything. It doesn't have any meaning to it. That's where analytics comes into play. We've been hearing a lot about AI and machine learning, but we're starting to really see a lot of connection with technology start to become intelligent. So that's when you take that dark data, you apply analytics to it, and now, machines are not only being able to sense, they're actually becoming aware. They're starting to make predictions. They're starting to act. So it's one thing to have a recognition of what's happening, and I always call it finding the current state. And there's no real ROI in telling people they suck. So if you think about a machine that's running and you've got data that says, oh, it's not optimized, it's not doing a very good job, your production line's not very efficient, there's no ROI in finding that out. What you really need to do is now take corrective action and automate that whole process. And that's where this whole continuum of the IoT comes into play. So we go from learning from the data and from the machines, what's actually happening as they talk to us. Then we need a better way to operate them through AI. And now the final feedback loop is when software also then takes the autocorrect action and changes the way that they're behaving. And this is not, I'm using the word machine, but it can be anything. It can be a traffic light, so that you could have adaptive traffic control in a city and start to figure out how many cars are at an intersection and how many pedestrians, and you can start to, in real time, automate the traffic lights.
I like that. There's no ROI in telling someone that they suck. I like that a lot. So if we go by this theory, which I think is totally accurate, which must be why I had you come on the show, the last 5 years have been about hooking up machines, getting the data, getting the body of the IoT together, and then the AI aspect being the brain, and then starting to do something with that. What if in the last 5 years you've been reading about the IoT and you're like, ooh, maybe we should try that? And maybe you're kind of dipping your toe in the water, but you're not there yet. Are these companies that have not built out the body yet, are they behind?
There are companies that have not built out the body. We speak to lots of large corporations that say things like, we want predictive maintenance, because they have the end goal. They know what they want, because there's ROI in that. So they go to the thing that they need. Now, what they don't have is every piece of equipment connected, whether it's wired on the floor or whether it's wireless. They have trapped pieces of equipment. We've been monitoring real high-level statistics to try to map out where we are in the evolution of the IoT. And things like sensor shift, for the first time, have dropped below 100% CAGR. So this year, they were about 91%. In previous years, they were up in the 130% growth rates. Now, other areas like monthly revenue, as it relates to machine, is still in the early days and is just starting to grow.
Is that monthly revenue for providing connectivity to these machines?
It's hard to tell. So I have to be careful with that one, because it is hard to tell whether it's just connectivity or if it's services. But it is M2M market revenue is got a 12% CAGR. And, we're still at kind of in the 300 billion range, which is, again, I suspect probably has some connectivity revenue thrown in there because it's such a large number already. But going back to your question around where are companies that may not be completely instrumented and censored out, I think they're not that far behind, because the technology and the innovation now to kind of drop in different ways to access machine data. And a lot of equipment is being built with sensors in it. It just wasn't used for different things. Again, I go back to my term dark data. It's there. It's sitting there. It's sort of trapped on its own little island. And now there are a lot of different service providers that are helping corporations connect and access that data. So you could catch up fairly quickly. I don't think anyone is materially behind that doesn't have a fully instrumented facility yet.
And if I'm thinking about making investments and I'm looking at getting to the dark data or even maybe doing something with it, is it too late for me to invest in those companies? Should I be starting up an analytics company at this point or a data cleansing company? Where should I be thinking for if I'm doing something now?
Going forward and looking into the future, that's sort of our prediction at our firm. McGraw Capital is heavily invested in a lot of hardware, a lot of what we would call the body type investments. We've dabbled into the brain side, into analytics. We have a company called Nubo in Montreal. And I'd say that what we learned through that investment is that we were waiting for a lot of people to get their systems up and running before they were ready to do it, like serious analytics. They had to get the body built. Looking forward to your question of what we're looking for in the future, I think we really are looking at the analytics side. We're looking at companies that actually can take all that data now. And a lot of these companies will be pure play software businesses. Some will still have a hardware component to them. And there's also another area that I kind of put hand in hand with analytics, which is cybersecurity. And that's a whole other area. But to me, that is, again, the analogy of body and the brain. Cybersecurity and analytics are the brain, and they are becoming more and more important as more instrumentation has happened and more connectivity has happened.
Got it. And let's dig into some of this. So what's important if you're going to be the analytics or the brain side? Let's break this down a little bit. You've got to have, I talk to dozens of companies each week that, they're like, oh, we're doing AI for IoT or AI for business transformation. What do they need to be able to do? How much room is in there for a variety of different analytics companies?
Well, if I broke down the analytics landscape, there are a number of companies that are doing what I'll almost call professional services. So they have hired some very intelligent data scientists, and they work with corporations to analyze data sets to try to understand what the, end goal of the customer is, to say, why do you want AI? What are you trying to accomplish? And there's a few different reactions. And the biggest ones come to, well, we think there's a value add or productivity gains that can be had if we analyze how our operations are being run. The other one is usually around people and how people interface and maybe customizing the way someone engages with technology on a personal level. And so different people have different end goals for why AI. But when you look back at the types of companies there are, you have a handful of technology businesses that are developing software tools, not very many, which are almost plug and play, like jam a huge data set in, and it's going to go look for pattern recognition, and it's going to start to discover things from that, what I call dark data. There are other companies that have really sophisticated teams of smart people where they are actually assisting in the learning of the AI. So the humans are still handling the data, and the touch is still higher than everyone believes. Marketing-wise, you wouldn't know that, but our experience is it's very hand-holding AI data analytics. So we're getting there. Then there are some true revolutionary off-the-shelf software technologies that are designed for, here, let me give you a real example, something around a specific type of equipment. And so it will have an agent, a machine learning agent, that starts to recognize certain situations and correlate failure of a piece of equipment based on things like temperature, vibration, different sensor readings. And it will start to map predictions on failure times, whether it's 7 days, 15 days, 30 days. And it's a self-learning algorithm. So, and it's run on a bunch of different machines across the world of a specific type. And every time there's a new state that's identified, it sort of runs a parallel experiment to see if it's just a new state and it's a new operating state that's fine, or if it's actually a failure mode and an indication of a failure mode. And so that truly is predictive analytics, because you're actually running an algorithm that constantly is learning about every different type of sensor feedback and then trying to detect when there's an anomaly that actually can lead to failure, and then through experience of data, figure out if it's 5 days or if it's 50 days. And then so you can start to take real action.
Got it. Okay. That does sound actually really cool. So now let's turn to cybersecurity. It's kind of the same question, which is when we're thinking about industrial IoT or just IoT in general, cybersecurity is a huge field. What are the types of solutions that we really need? What is different about cybersecurity for industrial IoT that we should be thinking about?
Well, the one area that I'm really excited about for 2019 is, and this is true of all IoT devices, that anytime a device connects to a network, and usually the devices we see that are vulnerable are the ones that are outside the firewall of, a traditional security system inside of a cyber kind of security perimeter. So anything that connects to the network wirelessly, whatever way that wireless is, I know everyone thinks Wi-Fi usually when we say wireless, but there are different types of technologies in the spectrum to connect, but that is just like a new open window. Any device connects, it's a new open window that hackers can get into and crawl around. And what we've seen so far in the last couple years is that they're weaponizing devices, anything from routers in the back of police cars to smart TVs. Those can be used for denial of service kind of attacks where hackers are just trying to clog the internet and take down certain sites. And so they're being clever and sneaky that way. And they're, as I call it, weaponizing IoT devices. But it's not really trying to hack the device itself. Now we're starting to see more specific cases of, attacks that are much more professionally done, and they're dedicated and targeted so they know what the device is. And these things can be really simple, like taking over the screens inside an airport and, just taking them down and then holding them for ransom to say, no one knows what gate they're going to or when the flights are leaving or departing in a large airport because we've basically taken control of all the displays. And again, wireless tends to be the area of vulnerability. So we see very little, put it this way, most companies don't even have an idea of what the wireless infrastructure that they're running, the networks, they have no idea what devices are connected to the network. And it's pretty interesting when you start to have technology that then looks at the types of devices that are connecting. People are surprised just even in the audit of what they even have from a wireless perspective. Even companies that don't think they have much find out that people run spy cameras, that there are drones in the vicinity that hook up to their network. We've had CEOs that have found that, when they're automatically hooking up to their, they think they're hooking up to a cellular tower from their cell phone, someone can actually replicate that cell tower just in a device in a car parked out front of the CEO's home. And now you're going to start to put data directly where you don't think you're putting it. The whole idea around wireless and protecting in the cyber sense against all of these different devices that are connecting is just fascinating and something that has to be done. And, we're part of the problem. A lot of the companies we back are putting more and more wirelessly connected devices into the universe.
Exactly.
And creating, So I feel compelled. We're probably making our last investment in Fund 1 in a wireless cybersecurity company for this very purpose.
Got it. And you guys are raising Fund 2, and that is where we're going to see more of your AI and analytics-focused investments, correct?
Exactly. So in the new year, we'll be finishing up the last investment in Fund 1, and we'll be launching the second fund. Largely the same strategy to invest in the industrial side of the IoT. We'll be working with a number of corporate groups that are currently investors in the fund that will continue on with us. Our fund is largely made up by a dollar amount of institutional financial investors who are looking for strong returns, but we do have a select group of very strategic limited partners, we call them, in the fund. The current fund that we're actively investing in right now has Cisco Systems, Caterpillar, and Electricité de France, which is the world's largest power utility. As we go into Fund 2, we'll increase the size of the fund slightly, up from 70 million in Fund 1 to 100 million in Fund 2. The focus will, again, start to shift a little bit as we see the IoT evolving, and we're going to start to move into a little bit more of the brain investments we've been talking about, where we have a few more companies on the analytics side. We have been mapping a host of cybersecurity companies that we also think are going to be urgently needed as people develop out their IoT strategy, and then they start to realize they have to have cyber resiliency baked in so that they make sure they're doing it safely and that they don't have embarrassing moments.
And then what about things like edge computing that people talk so much about? Does that fit in with your current thesis, or is that kind of a side project, or you guys just aren't focused there?
It's a good question, Stacy. I mean, clearly Cisco's very interested in edge. Anyone that makes a box that sits remotely somewhere wants to put compute power on it, have it make decisions and create increased value add for it. And I think there are applications that make total sense, right? Where you don't want to be sending tons and tons of data into the cloud when there's not a lot of changes on it, you know? And so you need the data, but it's pretty static data. Now, when it does change, it's usually catastrophic. And so you want to know about that. So I think there are a lot of interesting applications where you can have edge compute and devices will kind of do their own software analysis on the edge. And if there is that rare exception, that goes to the cloud or starts to be alerted to people independently. But yeah, no, I wouldn't say we're not focused in it. I just think the use cases are very specific where edge computing makes sense.
Got it. All right. Well, Scott, thank you so much for coming on the show today. I feel much smarter already and very excited about 2019.
Thanks, Stacy. I really appreciate it.
That's it for this week. Thanks so much for listening. And remember, if you'd like more IoT news, sign up for my newsletter at stacyoniot.com. We'll see you next week.